He called it a joke. He laughed. The whole room laughed. But when her fingers touched the keys and the first note rang out, 500 people fell completely silent. Because what they heard wasn't just music. It was 3 years of grief, sacrifice, and a daughter who had sold her father's piano to keep him alive, finally finding its way home. This is the story of that night. Eleanor Hayes was 25, and she believed something. The way you believe a thing you've tested so many times, it stops feeling like faith, starts feeling like fact. Music does not belong to the people with the nicest clothes. It belongs to the people who have bled for it. She had bled for it. Literally. The scar on her right hand was faint but permanent, a thin, pale ribbon from a Brooklyn bus accident 3 years ago. It had shattered more than bones. It had shattered the life she'd been building since she was 6. Since her father first lifted her onto a piano bench in their Flatbush Avenue kitchen and said, "Eleanor, this is how you talk to God." That life, the Juilliard life, the concert hall life, gone now. What remained? A second-hand tuning hammer, a canvas bag that smelled of rosin and old felt, and a Tuesday night gig at Carnegie Hall. Not performing, tuning. There is a difference. In the world Eleanor moved through now, that difference was everything. If you have ever felt overlooked because of your job, your age, or simply the way you walked into a room, stay with this story. It was a cold October evening on West 57th Street. Crystal chandeliers glowed over a charity music gala. Black tie, champagne, ticket prices starting at $2,000. Nobody blinking. Eleanor had arrived at 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours before the caterers. She always came early. She slipped in through the stage door, canvas bag over one shoulder, ponytail already coming loose. She set her bag beside the concert grand, a Steinway Model D, 9 feet of polished ebony, and she began her work, quietly, methodically. Test the octaves first. Listen for the wolf tones. Don't rush the unisons. Her father's instructions. She still heard them in his voice, every single time. She was deep into the middle register, mallet tapping softly, ear tilted toward the strings. When the hall began to fill around her, guests arrived in waves. Tuxedos and gowns, the kind of unhurried confidence that comes not from talent, but from money spent over many generations. Eleanor did not look up. She did not notice when Sebastian Voss walked in. Most people noticed. That was, of course, rather the point of Sebastian Voss. 33, dark-haired, sharp-jawed, fresh off a European tour. 4 prior performances on this same stage. He moved through the room with the slow ease of someone who has decided the world belongs to him. He noticed Eleanor mid-walk, head down, ponytail listing, shirt coming untucked on the left side. She looked exactly like someone who had come in through the wrong door and not yet realized it. He stopped, tilted his head, the way a man does when he sees a smudge on a very expensive painting. And then, loudly enough for the nearest dozen guests to hear, "You think you're an artist? Don't touch my piano with those rough repairman hands." The laughter came fast. The reflexive, grateful kind. The kind that rushes in when someone powerful swings first. Mrs. Langford, silver-haired, sapphire gown. She laughed the loudest, leaned toward the woman beside her. A piano tuner acting like she belongs here. Eleanor bit her lip, her right hand, the scarred one. Trembled once, then it steadied. She adjusted the final tuning pin and finished what she came to do. She did not flush. She did not look up. But in the front row, a man named Nathaniel Brooks watched the small movement of her hand, the tremble, then the steadying. His grip tightened slowly around the armrest of his chair. He said nothing. Not yet. What no one in that glittering room knew was what was truly locked inside the woman in the worn white shirt. They were about to find out. Keep watching, because what Eleanor does next is something no one in that hall will forget for the rest of their lives. Sebastian was not finished. One laugh was never enough for men like him. He turned to the room with a theatrical smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a very special guest. Our piano tuner believes she is talented enough to perform. Why don't we give her the chance to prove herself?" Laughter again, louder. Someone near the back actually applauded. Eleanor straightened slowly. She looked at him the way you look at a person who has said something foolish. Was what was truly locked inside the woman in the worn white shirt? They were about to find out. Keep watching, because what Eleanor does next is something no one in that hall will forget for the rest of their lives. Sebastian was not finished. One laugh was never enough for men like him. He turned to the room with a theatrical smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a very special guest. Our piano tuner believes she is talented enough to perform. Why don't we give her the chance to prove herself?" Laughter again, louder. Someone near the back actually applauded. Eleanor straightened slowly. She looked at him the way you look at a person who has said something foolish and does not yet know it. "I only wanted the piano to play the right notes, sir." Calm, steady, the way you state a fact about the weather. Sebastian blinked. He tilted his head, his smile sharpened. "Or are your hands too shaky from years of repair work to play anything at all?" Two security staff began moving toward the stage. Not quickly, but moving. That was when the front row changed everything. Nathaniel Brooks stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When the man whose name was on the charity fund itself rises and speaks, rooms stop. "Let her play. This is a charity gala for talent, not for gatekeeping." The security staff stopped where they stood, around the room. Donors began trading glances, the subtle, recalibrating kind. Nobody had seen that coming, least of all Sebastian. Eleanor's right hand moved without her thinking, fingers brushing over the ridge of scar tissue the way you touch an old bruise to see if it still hurts. It did. It always did. She closed her eyes for just 1 second. She was on Flatbush Avenue, the radiator ticking, her father beside her on the bench, his large hands guiding hers through the opening bars of Chopin's Ballade No. 1. The left hand carries the weight, so the right hand can sing. True of music, Ellie. True of life. After the accident, the surgery, the months practicing chord shapes on the kitchen table because she couldn't afford a piano. She had applied for a Juilliard scholarship, midnight, between catering shifts, recorded the audition tape on her phone with a towel over the bathroom door. The rejection arrived on a Thursday. 3 sentences. The second, not a suitable profile for our current cohort needs. She used it as a coaster until the ink ran. 6 weeks later, she sold her father's piano. The honey-colored Yamaha U1, $1,800. The bill was $19.40. She covered the difference with diner tips from Queens Boulevard. She had never told any of this to anyone. Dad, she thought it now, music is bigger than pain. You told me that. I'm finally going to prove it. She walked to the bench and sat down. The room had not quieted. Still conversation at the back tables. Still the clink of glasses. A pair of older women near the left aisle. One saying audibly, "This will be uncomfortable for everyone." Sebastian was already telling his assistant. A nervous young man named Colin, who had been quietly miserable for 14 months. "Don't let her play too long. She'll ruin the atmosphere." Colin nodded, reached for his phone. Eleanor placed her hands on the keys. Left hand first, right hand a beat behind. The way she had done it 10,000 times before the accident, and 10,000 times since. Muscle memory. Below thought. She played a 4-bar warm-up, unhurried. The sound that came out was clean, precise, quietly astonishing. Not a performance of technique, just exactly right, in the way that real things are. 3 tables near the stage stopped mid-conversation, then 4 more. A woman in a red gown turned around slowly. The way you turn when you hear something and aren't certain it was real. Nathaniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He had watched Eleanor tune this same instrument 2 months ago during a private session, heard her play a few bars just to test the voicing, and he had understood exactly who she was. He had said nothing. He hadn't wanted to put that weight on her before she was ready. Talent doesn't need pedigree, he thought it now. It only needs a chance. Eleanor stopped the warm-up, sat still for 1 beat. Then she looked out at the room, not at Sebastian, not at Nathaniel, at the room itself. All of it. This one, her voice was quiet but clear, is for everyone who was told they weren't enough. And she began. She said, "This one's for everyone who was told they weren't enough." Then put her hands on the keys. Would you have had that courage? The first note of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor rang through Carnegie Hall like a stone dropped into still water. Clear, resonant, inevitable. The laughter stopped. Just like that. Not gradually, not the way noise fades when something politely quiets it. It stopped the way a conversation stops when something real walks into the room and makes everything else feel suddenly small by comparison. 3 seconds. That was all it took. 3 seconds of Eleanor Hayes playing Chopin. And Carnegie Hall understood that it had made a very significant error. She played the opening theme with quiet authority, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It simply is. Her left hand moved in those long, rocking arcs, steady and patient, exactly as her father had taught her. Her right hand found the melody and held it with a tenderness that made the notes feel less like music, more like something spoken aloud after years of silence. This was the piece Thomas Hayes had taught her in the Flatbush living room, the piece she had played at her first Juilliard audition at 17, hands shaking so badly she had pressed her palms flat against her thighs in the elevator on the way up, trying to push the trembling out before it showed. The piece she had practiced since the accident, only in her imagination, fingers moving along the edge of the kitchen counter, along the seam of her jeans on the F train, along the steering wheel of the second-hand Honda she drove to tuning jobs in New Jersey. Because she no longer owned a piano. And the piano she tuned belonged to other people. Now she was playing it on the finest instrument in America, and she was playing it like it had been building inside her for 3 years behind a closed door, and someone had finally, tonight, turned the handle. Sebastian stood at the side of the stage, arms crossed, jaw set, doing the thing people do when they know they're wrong but haven't decided whether to admit it. He waited for a stumble through the exposition, through the development section, where the ballade darkens and Chopin layers grief over grief. Eleanor didn't pull back. She leaned in, shoulders dropping, chin tilting toward the keys, and the music stopped being only Chopin. It became something else. A woman at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, reading a 3-sentence rejection letter by stovelight. Tears came without announcement, the quiet kind, not for the room. She wasn't playing for the room, not really, but because this was the piece her father had loved, and she had not played it since she sold the Yamaha. And there are things the body remembers and releases when you finally let it. A tear slipped down her left cheek. Then another. The microphone on the Steinway caught her voice. Barely a breath. The softest thread of sound. Dad, this one's for you. Half the room heard it. The other half saw the tears and understood without hearing. Either way, something shifted. You could feel it. A change in the quality of the room's attention. The way a crowd shifts from watching something to being inside something. Sebastian saw his opening. He stepped forward, slightly, and said in his carrying stage voice, the one trained to project to the back of a full house. Her phrasing in that section is rushed. Technically speaking, the ritardando is, Eleanor did not stop. She did not flinch. She did not look at him. What she did was something that took Sebastian several slow seconds to fully understand. She improvised, subtly, with the ease of someone whose relationship with music is too deep to be rattled by a man talking at the edge of her peripheral vision. She bent the phrase, extended it, rerouted it, and turned the precise spot he had pointed to into the most emotionally arresting moment of the performance. It was the musical equivalent of someone throwing a punch, and the other person turning it into a waltz. Sebastian stopped talking. The arrival of the fast section, the technical gauntlet at the end of the ballade, the passage that demands speed and precision beyond what most people, even in a conservatory setting, can reliably deliver. It produced a visible change in the audience. People straightened. A few leaned forward without being aware they were doing it. The involuntary posture of witnessing something athletic and uncertain at the same time. Eleanor's right hand trembled. Once. The scar tissue pulling. The way it always pulled when she pushed past the comfort range her physical therapist had mapped out 3 years ago and told her, kindly, carefully, to respect. She heard the tremor in the note. Her breath caught. She played through it, not around it, through it. Her hand steadied itself through the act of continuing, and the passage opened up, the right hand running in those climbing arcs of notes, each one clean and struck true. The kind of playing that makes musicians in the audience close their eyes without meaning to, because that is the correct response to watching someone do something very difficult and make it look like the most natural thing in the world. She completed the final run. Carnegie Hall erupted. Not polite gala applause, not the measured, practiced clap of people in expensive clothing trying not to disturb their neighbors or their dignity. Real applause. The involuntary kind. The kind that starts before people have consciously decided to produce it. The kind that leaves palms stinging and continues because nobody wants to be the first one to sit back down. Nathaniel had started applauding mid-performance, a firm, deliberate endorsement. The kind that breaks protocol and does it proudly. Now he was on his feet. Mrs. Langford had stood a moment after Nathaniel, not because he had, on her own. She had risen from that chair the way women rise when something genuinely moves them. Carefully. One hand briefly on the seat back. But without the slightest hesitation, her champagne glass was on the floor somewhere, abandoned. Her face, that face so recently arranged in the architecture of polite amusement at the piano tuner's expense, was wet. She was crying, not weeping, just the full eyes, the steady chin, the tears slipping quiet as rain off a window, the way you cry at something true when you've lived long enough to recognize it. In the back of the hall, a young woman who had arrived as a +1 and spent most of the evening checking her phone, had been pointing it at the stage for the last 4.5 minutes. She didn't lower it. The live stream counter climbed past 60,000 viewers. Sebastian had gone very still. His arrogant smile was entirely gone. In its place was an expression far more interesting. The look of a man processing the full dimensions of a mistake he made, specifically, traceably, 4 years ago. The look of a man who has just understood that the stage he is standing on has inverted. Nathaniel leaned close to his assistant and said very quietly, "She is exactly why I sponsored this." In the audience, older women were pressing handkerchiefs to their eyes. A man in the third row, silver-haired, who had not cried publicly in 30 years, was staring straight ahead at the stage with his hands clasped and his jaw working. If you had asked him afterward what he was thinking, he would have said honestly that he was thinking about his daughter, who had wanted to be a painter and had stopped painting when her second child was born and had never gone back. Eleanor rose from the bench. She wiped her face with the back of her left hand. She looked at the room, And then she did something that changed the entire night. She opened her mouth and spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the particular steadiness of someone who has been holding something in their chest for a very long time and has decided, in this exact moment, to set it down. What she said next stopped the applause cold. What she told that room, the truth she had never spoken aloud to anyone, was the thing that turned a remarkable performance into something none of them were ready for. The applause hadn't fully finished when Eleanor spoke. She pressed her right hand flat against her thigh, the old habit, the private one, and turned to face Sebastian. "You didn't just reject a piano tuner tonight." The room quieted in an instant. "You rejected a daughter who was listening to her father slowly die, because she couldn't afford his medical bills." She let the words settle. "The same girl whose Juilliard scholarship application you personally signed off on 4 years ago, with the note, 'Not a suitable profile.' Not a sound, not a cough, not the clink of a single glass." Sebastian's mouth opened, closed. There were hundreds of applications." His voice had lost its stage projection, smaller now. "I can't be expected to remember every—" "I remember," Eleanor said. That was the end of that sentence. The room had already understood. The air pressure changed, the way it changes just before a storm. People were looking at Sebastian differently, not with admiration, with something that had an edge and wasn't going away. He had dismissed her once through a faceless process, with a signature on a sheet of paper, and then dismissed her again tonight, in front of hundreds of people, for sport. And she had been here all along, tuning his piano, making sure his keys rang true. "I sold my father's piano to pay off his medical debt," Eleanor continued, her voice steady. The way a voice gets when you have passed through grief and come out differently whole. "A Yamaha U1. He'd saved 2 years to buy it. I got $1,800. The bill was $1940. A small pause. "I covered the difference with weekend tips from a diner on Queens Boulevard. Then got myself a tuning certification because that was the only way I could still be close to music, without a piano of my own." The live stream counter passed 90,000 viewers. Mrs. Langford rose slowly from her seat. A woman who had never, in any room this size, been required to apologize for anything. That certainty was gone now. She stood and looked at Eleanor, and what was in her face was not guilt management. It was genuine. "I laughed at you." Quieter than anyone had heard her all evening. "I am sorry. You deserved better than all of us." Eleanor looked at her for a moment, then nodded once. "Thank you. That matters." Nathaniel stood, not as a patron, as a man who has carried something heavy and decided to put it down. "I used to be Sebastian." The room went still enough to hear the ventilation system. 14 years ago, I sat on a grant committee and passed a gifted musician's file across the table without hearing a single note. I said, "Not ready," because her resume didn't have the right conservatory. Nobody pushed back. He paused. "I never found out what happened to her. That's the part I still carry." He looked at Sebastian. "Tonight, I refuse to repeat that mistake." Sebastian opened his mouth, something about context, institutional realities, multiple reviewers. Nathaniel turned toward him, steadily, with the quiet authority of a man who knows when a conversation is over. "This is a moment for accountability, not excuses." And that was when Eleanor's hand seized, sharp, contracted, the scar tissue pulling tight. Her fingers curled inward. She pressed her hand against her hip, fast, trying to hide it. Nathaniel was crossing the stage before he had decided to move, hand on her shoulder, steadying. "Are you all right?" Low, just for her. "I'm fine." The automatic answer, The one that means, I am not fine, but I am not stopping. She breathed, steadied. His hand remained a moment longer than strictly necessary. Neither of them acknowledged it, which is its own kind of acknowledgement. Sebastian crossed toward them, stopped a few feet away. The polish gone, the projection gone. Just a man standing in very bright light, holding the full weight of what he had done. I'm sorry. For the first time that night, it sounded true. Eleanor looked at him for a long, quiet moment. An apology is not enough. Give someone else the chance you once took from me. The room answered for itself. Applause, warmer this time, more deliberate. The sound of people choosing. A clip from the live stream would later be titled, "She said to his face what every overlooked person has ever wanted to say." By midnight, 4 million views, but in Carnegie Hall, in that exact moment. None of that existed yet. What existed was Eleanor Hayes, standing in the brightest light on West 57th Street, hands steady, scar visible and unashamed. The night not yet finished. She still had one more thing to play, what Sebastian did next. When no one was watching, nearly destroyed everything. The intermission before Eleanor's second piece was 14 minutes long. A brief pause, ostensibly for champagne, but really to let Eleanor rest her hand, breathe, and eat the small plate of food that appeared from the catering table as if by quiet instruction. She sat in the wings on a folding chair, eyes closed, right hand wrapped around a cold water bottle, listening to the murmur of the room through the curtain. She could hear people saying her name, the words Juilliard and scholarship moving through the crowd like water finding its level. She didn't try to hear more clearly. She already knew the story. She had lived it. Sebastian was also in the wings. He stood near the opposite entrance, alone. His assistant Colin having removed himself to a quiet corner near the loading dock, where he was composing an email to NYU's Music Education Department about spring enrollment. He'd been meaning to send it for 3 years. Tonight had clarified something. Sebastian stood still, looking at the stage. Then he did something a stagehand named Marcus, 22, third week on the job, would never forget. Sebastian crossed to the Steinway under the pretense of retrieving a handkerchief from the bench. He leaned over. His hand brushed 3 keys in the upper middle register. Not hard enough to sound, but enough. Enough to shake the voicing on 2 hammers that Eleanor had spent 40 minutes getting exactly right. Marcus frowned, looked at Sebastian's face. Sebastian straightened, tucked the handkerchief away, and walked back into the wings as if nothing had happened. Marcus stood there a moment. He was 22 and new, but he decided it was his place. He walked directly to the stage manager. By the time the report reached Nathaniel's assistant, the intermission was over, and Eleanor was already walking back on stage. She did not know. She sat down at the Steinway, placed her hands on the keys, and began Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The piece that sounds, if it is played well, like someone telling you that the worst part of the night is finally over. The audience settled. The chandeliers held their glow for the first 2 minutes. The hall breathed differently, slower, deeper, with the particular quality of a room that has been genuinely moved and is now being asked to receive something tender. Eleanor played it exactly the way the piece deserved to be played. No performance, no demonstration, just the music, clean and true. And then she reached the climax. The moment where the right hand carries the melody up into the upper register, exposed, singing, demanding everything the hand has left to give. Both things happened at the same time. The sabotaged keys produced a fractionally off tone, just slightly, just enough. And the pain in her hand arrived with the specific cruelty of nerve damage that has been pushed past its boundary. Her right hand contracted. The melody broke. One wrong note. hanging in the air like a word said at exactly the wrong moment, in exactly the wrong room. The audience's breath stopped. Eleanor stopped. For exactly 1 second, one full breath. Then she made a choice. She did not leave the bench. She did not apologize. She did not look at her hand. She looked at the keys, just the keys. The 88 of them, familiar as the face of someone she had loved her whole life. And she found a new path forward. She improvised, not in the panicked, scrambling way of someone trying to recover, in the way that happens when music lives somewhere below conscious thought, when the years of practice and grief and repetition have laid down something deeper than technique. She took the broken phrase and she extended it, bent it, turned it into something that was not Chopin at all, but was unmistakably Eleanor. Something that sounded like a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and a honey-colored piano being lifted into a truck, and $1,800 that was never going to be enough. Tears ran down her face. She whispered, not to the microphone, not to the room, just to the air, to her father, to herself. This is why I became a tuner, but I never stopped believing. Nathaniel was on his feet before the sentence finished. He crossed to the stage microphone near the steps and spoke over the silence of the room, his voice rough and clear. Her pain is exactly what this charity is supposed to fight for. Talent deserves healing, not judgment. Mrs. Langford turned to the room. This time she did not look uncertain. She looked like a woman who has made up her mind and intends to be heard. Let her finish. It started as a murmur, spread to a chant. Then it was the whole room, the donors and the caterers and the stagehand named Marcus, who was standing at the wings with his arms crossed and his chin up. All of it together. Let her finish. Let her finish. Let her finish. Sebastian sank into a chair against the back wall. He was not going to interrupt again. There was nothing left to interrupt with. Everything he had been in this room. The authority, the credentials, the proprietary ease of a man who believed certain things belonged to certain people and not to others, had been completely, publicly, and irreversibly dismantled. He sat in the back of the Carnegie Hall stage like a man at the end of a lesson he had needed for a long time. Eleanor took a breath. She started the Ballade No. 1 from the very beginning. The piece her father had taught her. The piece that had started all of this tonight. She did not play the nocturne again. She played the piece that meant something, the piece that was hers. From the first note to the last, every bar, uninterrupted, her scarred hand was steady. Carnegie Hall rose. A 5-minute standing ovation, the kind that keeps going because nobody wants to be the first to say it's over. When the applause finally thinned, Nathaniel stepped to the main stage microphone. He announced that Eleanor Hayes was appointed, effective immediately, as the founding director of the Brooks Scholarship Program for Underprivileged Talent. He said he had been watching her work for 2 months. He said the right moment had arrived and announced itself. Then he looked at Sebastian. "You will join this program," he said, "not as a featured artist, as a teacher. As someone learning, perhaps for the first time, what it means to serve the talent you once dismissed." Sebastian nodded, once, slowly, with the particular quality of a man making the first genuinely honest decision he had made in a very long time. The role reversal was complete. Sebastian sat in the back row, while Eleanor stood at the front of the stage, quiet and still, in her worn white shirt, with the scar on her hand visible under the chandeliers. Nathaniel leaned close and said, low enough that only she could hear, "You taught me the most important lesson of this entire night." She looked at him. "What lesson?" she asked. He thought about it for a moment, then he said, "That the person who knows a room best is usually the one everyone decided not to see." The gala ended in warmth. The particular warmth that only comes when a room full of people has collectively witnessed something true and hasn't yet found the words for it. Guests lingered. They introduced themselves to people they had sat beside all evening without speaking to. Several of them told Eleanor stories about a sister who had quit music in her 30s to raise a family, a mother who played piano only when she thought no one was listening, a dream they had set aside in 1987 and never quite stopped thinking about. She listened to every one of them. But the night wasn't over yet, and the conversation that happened afterward, outside, in the dark, with the streetlights on and no audience left, that was the one that mattered most of all. Central Park after midnight in October is one of the quieter places left in New York. Traffic on Central Park South softens to a murmur. Street lamps cast amber ovals across the path. The leaves are mostly still on the trees, honey and rust, but beginning their slow letting go. Eleanor and Nathaniel walked the path inside the park's south entrance with no plan, which is the only proper way to walk anywhere after the night they'd both just survived. Canvas bag on her shoulder, his jacket over his arm. The comfortable kind of silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. "I want to be clear about something," Nathaniel said eventually. Eleanor glanced at him. "I didn't save you tonight," he said. "You were never in danger of not being exactly who you are. All I did was make sure the room had to stop talking long enough to hear it." She was quiet for a moment. "The artist you overlooked," she said. 14 years ago, the one from the grant committee?" He didn't answer right away. Somewhere in the middle distance, a set of park sprinklers had come on along one of the south paths, running quietly in the dark, doing their patient, unwitnessed work. The sound of them was steady and unhurried, and it was the most peaceful thing Eleanor had heard all evening. "I don't know what happened to her," Nathaniel said finally. "I never tried to find out." "That's the part I still carry," Eleanor nodded. "Then find out." He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Not a smile exactly, but the thing that lives just before a smile, the place where grief and hope overlap. He said nothing. He didn't need to. They walked. The sprinklers ran. A cab moved along the outer road, its headlights sweeping the trees, and then was gone. She looked down at her right hand in the lamplight. The scar was still there. It would always be there. She had made peace with it the way you make peace with the permanent things, not by liking them, but by letting them be part of the map rather than the destination. The hand that had tuned other people's pianos in the dark for 3 years. The hand that had, tonight, played Carnegie Hall. Both things were true. Both always had been. She thought about her father. She thought about the Yamaha U1 and the kitchen table on Flatbush Avenue, and the smell of the Pyrex bowl her mother had left behind when she left, still in the cabinet, still used for nothing because Eleanor couldn't quite bring herself to take it down and use it for something ordinary. She thought about the rejection letter folded in the kitchen drawer, and the diner on Queens Boulevard, and the way her father had looked at the hospital, thin, patient, still telling the nurses his daughter was going to play Carnegie Hall someday. Accepting no disagreement on the matter. He was right. She thought it now. He was right about everything. In the weeks that followed, the Brooks Scholarship Program grew with the quiet momentum of something that has been waiting for the right conditions. Within a year, 47 musicians had received instruments, training, and medical support through the program. People who had no other door to walk through and had nearly stopped looking. Mrs. Langford became one of the scholarship's most passionate donors, not just with checks, with phone calls, with connections, with the particular tenacity of a woman who has decided to make something right and intends to see it through. She called Eleanor personally every month. Eleanor looked forward to those calls more than she expected to. Sebastian taught beginner theory workshops on Thursday evenings at a community center on the Lower East Side. He was not good at it at first. He was used to being looked at, not looking, performing, not listening. But he kept coming back on Thursdays. The way you come back to something that is hard and therefore necessary. And slowly. The way genuine change always happens. Not in a flood, but in a patient seep. He became better, more present, more human. Colin enrolled in NYU's music education program that January, his first semester. He called Eleanor to tell her. She told him she wasn't surprised. He said he was. She said, "Most people who do the brave thing are." Eleanor moved to a slightly larger apartment in Astoria, still Queens, still modest, but with a south-facing window that caught the afternoon light the way her father's living room window on Flatbush Avenue had caught it on winter Sundays. That particular low gold that makes everything look like a memory you're glad you kept. She bought a piano, a used Kawai upright, nothing fancy, but well-maintained, with keys that responded cleanly and a warm middle register that reminded her, faintly, of the Yamaha U1. Not enough to hurt, just enough to feel right. She kept taking tuning jobs. She genuinely liked them, the intimacy of the work, the way it required you to really listen, the particular satisfaction of leaving an instrument better than you found it. She kept the canvas bag and the second-hand tuning hammer. She saw no reason to retire them. On Saturday mornings, she taught piano in the community room of her building. Retired teachers, grandchildren visiting from out of town. A man of 73 named Leonard, who had always wanted to learn, and had decided, firmly and without apology, that it was not too late. It was not too late. She knew that now, from evidence. This story teaches us something. You cannot measure what a person carries inside them by the job they hold today, or the clothes on their back, or the scar on their hand. You do not know the piano they sold, or the letter that arrived on a Thursday morning, or the hours they spent keeping someone else's music alive while quietly allowing their own to wait. The women in this country who have sat at kitchen tables at 2 in the morning, paying bills that didn't have a good answer, holding families together with patience and the quiet courage of people who just keep showing up. Those women know something no credential can teach. They know what it costs to carry something beautiful through hard years without letting it die. Eleanor Hayes walked into Carnegie Hall as a piano tuner. She walked out as something she had always been. The only thing that changed was that someone finally gave her a chair. Be the person who pulls out the chair. You cannot know. You truly cannot know what kind of music has been waiting patiently for that one small invitation. And if you are the one who has been waiting, if you are the one whose talent has been playing itself out quietly in the background, in the kitchen, in the ordinary Tuesday mornings that nobody writes stories about, know this: the hall is still there. The keys are still warm, and it is never too late to sit down and play. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. You might be the one who pulls out their chair. These narratives were crafted by real individuals who care deeply about truth and fairness. AI helped organize and enhance readability, ensuring the powerful takeaways about kindness, accountability, and human resilience reach and impact audiences worldwide.